The Tiger's Claw, How Tipu Sultan Humbled an Empire. September 1780. The scorching winds of the Carnatic Plains carried the scent of gunpowder and fear. The British East India Company, drunk on its recent conquests in Bengal, believed it was the master of India. They had violated the Treaty of Madras, marched armies through sovereign territory, and treated the local rulers with disdain. But in the Kingdom of Mysore, they did not face a fragmented rabble. They faced a father and son who were forging a new destiny for the subcontinent. Hyder Ali, the aging but formidable ruler of Mysore, sat in his command tent as the architect of this resistance, a man who saw the British not merely as traitors, but as an existential threat to all Indians, Hindus and Muslims alike. Beside him stood his son, Tipu Sultan, 30 years old, fierce, and possessing an intellect as sharp as his sword, ready to become the spear of the Mysorean army. Hyder Ali looked at the map and spoke words that would define the conflict, knowing the British believed their squares and muskets were invincible, and he sent his son to show them that the Tiger of Mysore did not bow. The British plan was indeed arrogant. General Hector Munro, the man who had crushed Indian armies in the north, sent Colonel William Baillie with a massive detachment of nearly 4,000 elite troops to crush Mysore, expecting the Mysoreans to scatter at the sight of the Union Jack. But on September 10, 1780, near the village of Pollilur, Tipu Sultan sprang a trap that would echo through history. As documented in the harrowing memoirs of British officer Hector Munro, the British found themselves suddenly surrounded, for Tipu did not just charge blindly, but used the terrain to cut off their escape before unleashing a weapon the British had never seen before. A terrifying, shrieking noise filled the air as the Mysorean Rockets, iron-cased projectiles with a range and explosive power that shocked the Europeans, rained down on Baillie's ammunition carts. These weapons were so advanced that, as cited in later British military analysis by William Congreve in 1804, they became the basis for the very rockets the British would later use in the Napoleonic Wars. A massive explosion ripped through the British center, and the invincible British square collapsed, panic setting in as the oppressors, who were used to dictating terms, were now screaming in terror. Tipu Sultan led the final charge, his cavalry smashing into the broken British lines in a slaughter that forced the arrogant Colonel Baillie to raise the white flag, capturing him along with hundreds of his men. The humiliation deepened just a few miles away, where the main British commander, General Hector Munro, heard the destruction of his detachment and was paralyzed with fear. In a moment of disgrace recorded in the official Fort George records, Munro did the unthinkable. He threw his heavy artillery into the temple tank at Kanchipuram to lighten his load and fled in disgrace back to Madras, chased by Tipu's cavalry, leaving the myth of British invincibility shattered in the dust. The war dragged on, and in December 1782, the wise patriarch Hyder Ali passed away, leading the British to celebrate in the mistaken belief that Mysore would crumble without its old king. Instead, the torch was passed to Tipu Sultan, who did not pause to mourn but accelerated the war, checking the British on every front. When the British tried to capture the port of Mangalore to choke Mysore's economy, Tipu marched his army across the peninsula with lightning speed and besieged the British garrison. For months, the British ate rats and boiled leather, waiting for help that never came, while Tipu stood at the gates not as a supplicant, but as a conqueror. By 1874, the British East India Company was bankrupt and broken in the south, forcing them to send envoys to Tipu's camp, heads bowed, begging for peace. This led to the Treaty of Mangalore, a document that historians like William Dalrymple in The Anarchy note was unique in the history of colonial India because it was dictated by the Indian king, not the company. Tipu Sultan forced the British to return all occupied territories and acknowledge him as a sovereign equal, a humiliation confirmed by the text of the treaty itself, which restored the status quo ante bellum. As the British envoys left his tent, clutching the treaty that proved their defeat, Tipu had proven that an Indian king could bring the mightiest empire on earth to its knees, embodying his famous creed that it is better to live one day as a lion than 100 years as a giant.